The sun was setting over New Haven Colony when Sergeant Kyle Martinez walked the perimeter fence with Duke at his side. The Belgian Malinois with quiet confidence, his ears alert to every sound in the growing darkness beyond the settlement. Kyle had been stationed on this frontier world for 8 months now, and every evening followed the same routine. Check the fence line. Scan for breaches. Make sure the civilian areas were secure. Duke suddenly stopped and his body went rigid. Kyle recognized the signal immediately after 5 years together and dropped his hand to his sidearm. Something was out there in the forest beyond the fence. Something that didn't belong. What is it, boy? Kyle whispered, but Duke remained focused on a point, about 50 meters into the tri-line. The dog's nose worked the air and a low growl built in his throat. Kyle activated his comm unit and reported to base that they had possible wildlife activity near Sector 7. Administrator Lisa Chun's voice crackled back through his earpiece with unexpected news. They had visitors in orbit. A Zentari hunting party had arrived that morning and received permission to hunt in the wilderness, zones far from the settlement. The Zentari were famous across the galaxy as the ultimate predators, a species that had never lost a hunt in their long history. Kyle felt uneasy, but Lisa assured him the Zentari were hunting in designated areas at least 100 kilometers from the colony. There was no way they could be near the settlement already. Duke disagreed, and the dog's instincts had never been wrong before. Kyle decided to investigate and moved toward the fence with Duke leading the way. The Malinois tracked something neither human eyes nor the settlement sensors could detect. They reached the fence, and Kyle peered into the darkening forest. Then he saw Ida, massive shape, move through the trees with unnatural grace. It stood at least 8 feet tall, and its reptilian skin seemed to shimmer and blend with the shadows. The creature moved like liquid death, and Kyle realized with horror that it was stalking toward the settlement. Zentari hunter. Kyle shouted into his comm and raised his rifle. Sector 7, I have a hostile approaching the fence. The alien stopped and turned its head toward Kyle. Even in the dim light, Kyle could see the predator's eyes lock onto him with cold calculation. The Zentari made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. Duke barked a warning and positioned himself between Kyle and the fence. The alien moved with shocking speed and crashed through the fence like it was paper. Kyle opened fire, but the creature dodged with impossible reflexes. Its camouflage skin shifted colors to match its surroundings and made it hard to track. Duke launched himself at the alien with a fierce snarl, and the Zentari seemed surprised by the attack. It swatted at the dog, but Duke was too fast and darted away before those clawed hands could connect. Kyle used the distraction to get a better angle and fired 3 rounds into the creature's shoulder. The Zentari roared in pain and anger. This was not how hunts were supposed to go, and prey was not supposed to fight back effectively. Kyle and Duke worked together like they had 100 times before in training and combat. Duke harassed the alien from one side while Kyle fired from the other. The Zentari was stronger and faster than any enemy they had faced, but it was alone, and they were a team after several intense minutes. The alien hunter retreated back through the broken fence and disappeared into the forest. Kyle didn't chase it because his job was to protect the settlement, not hunt aliens. In the dark, emergency lights flooded the perimeter as security teams rushed to Kyle's position. Duke stood panting beside him, and Kyle checked the dog for injuries, but found none. The fence had a massive hole torn through it, and green blood marked where Kyle's rounds had struck. Lisa Chun arrived in a hover vehicle with her face pale. What happened here? Kyle gave his report while medical staff checked his vitals, and Duke drank water from a portable bowl. A young Zentari hunter had apparently broken from his party's designated hunting area and wandered into the settlement zone. When he encountered Kyle and Duke, the alien had marked them as prey and attacked. Lisa immediately contacted the Zentari ship in orbit and demanded an Explanation within an hour. A larger Xanthari arrived at the settlement's command center. This one wore ceremonial markings and introduced himself as Hunting Master Vexter. He listened to Lisa's complaint with what appeared to be calm patience. Then he delivered news that made everyone in the room go silent. The hunter who attacked your guard is named Kreshva, and he is young but determined. Vexter's voice was deep and resonant. By Xanthari law, once a hunter has been marked by prey, the hunt must continue until one dies. This is our way, and has been for 10,000 years. Lisa argued that this was unacceptable, and that humans were not prey animals to be hunted for sport. Vexter showed something like regret, but remained firm in his position. Kreshva's honor demands he complete the kill, and our culture forbids me from interfering, the hunting master explained. If I stop him, he will be exiled and his family dishonored. But I assure you the Xanthari do not lose hunts, and this will be over quickly. Kyle stood at the back of the room with Duke and felt cold anger building in his chest. This alien was calmly explaining that he was going to let his subordinate hunt and kill Kyle like an animal. And if your hunter fails? Kyle asked, and every head turned toward him. Vexter's eyes focused on the human sergeant with new interest. Xanthari do not fail. We are apex predators on every world we have ever visited, and no species has bested us in combat. Your resistance today was admirable, but ultimately meaningless. We'll see about that, Kyle said quietly, and Duke growled agreement. Lisa tried to negotiate and offered to have Kyle confined to the base while the Xanthari hunting party left the planet. Vexter shook his head and explained that Kreshva would simply wait in orbit until the human emerged. The hunt could last days or months, but it would not end until one of them was dead. The hunting master did offer one concession. He would ensure Kreshva followed traditional hunting rules and used only natural abilities and basic weapons. Number advanced technology or ranged energy weapons. This was supposed to make Kyle feel better, but it didn't after Vexter left the command center. Lisa ordered the civilian population to shelter in the reinforced central buildings. Kyle was assigned to guard the civilian areas since he was the target, and the alien would come to him. Military reinforcements were 4 days away by the fastest ship available, and Kyle had to survive that long while protecting 300 colonists, including families with children. He went to the armory and checked out additional ammunition and equipment. While Duke waited patiently, a young girl named Amy Walker found them there, and she ran up to hug Duke around his neck. The 8-year-old had become attached to the military dog during Kyle's posting and visited him almost daily with treats. Is it true there's a monster coming? Amy asked with wide eyes. Kyle knelt down to her level and spoke gently. There's a dangerous alien coming, but Duke and I are going to keep everyone safe. I promise you don't need to be scared. Amy looked at Duke and then back to Kyle. Duke is the bravest dog in the whole galaxy. Yes, he is. Kyle agreed and meant it with his whole heart. Amy's parents called her away to the shelters, and Kyle watched her go. He thought about all the children in the colony and all the families who came to New Haven looking for a peaceful life on the frontier. They didn't deserve to be caught in an alien's honor hunt. Duke pressed against Kyle's leg in a gesture of support and loyalty. Just you and me, boy, Kyle said softly. Like always, the dog looked up at him with absolute trust, and Kyle felt strengthened by that bond. Humans and dogs had evolved together over thousands of years, and their partnership was unique in the galaxy. No alien could understand that connection or the strength it provided. Night fell completely over New Haven and somewhere in the darkness. Beyond the lights, a Xanthari hunter prepared for round 2. Kyle and Duke took their position at the civilian shelters, outer perimeter, and waited for whatever came next. Morning came with harsh light across the colony, and Kyle had spent the entire night on watch with Duke alert beside him. No attack had come, but Kyle knew the Xanthari hunter was out there somewhere planning his next move. Administrator Lisa Chun called him to the command center where Hunting Master Vexter had returned. The massive alien stood examining a holographic display of the colony layout with professional interest. "I wish to speak with you, Sergeant Martinez," Vexter said when Kyle entered with Duke. "You should understand what you face." Kyle crossed his arms and waited while Duke sat at attention. Vexter began explaining Xanthari culture and their place in the galaxy as the ultimate hunters. They had visited thousands of worlds and hunted the deadliest creatures on each one. Their biology gave them natural advantages that made them nearly unstoppable. Thermal vision to see heat signatures in darkness, motion detection sensitive enough to track a heartbeat from 50 meters away, pheromone analysis that let them smell fear and track prey for days. Their skin could shift colors for perfect camouflage, and their strength was 3 times that of a fit human male. Reaction speed was faster than human neural processing could match, and pain tolerance was remarkable. Xanthari hunters train from childhood, Vexter continued. By the time they take their first hunt, they have studied predator tactics from 100 worlds. Kreshva is young, but he has already completed 7 successful hunts, including a Thoraxian, the lizard which killed 2 of his teachers. Kyle listened without showing emotion, though the information was concerning. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Vexter studied him with those predator eyes. "Because I respect courage even in prey. You fought well yesterday and wounded Kreshva, which no other species has done on their first encounter. You deserve to understand the challenge before you. And if I kill your hunter, then I will be forced to complete the hunt myself to restore our honor," Vexter said calmly. "But this will not happen. Xanthari do not lose." Duke growled low, and the hunting master's gaze shifted to the dog with curiosity. "The creature fights alongside you?" Vexter asked. "Duke is my partner, not a creature," Kyle corrected. "Humans and dogs have worked together for over 15,000 years. We understand each other better than you could imagine." Vexter made a dismissive sound. "A trained beast, useful but ultimately just a tool like your weapon." Kyle felt anger flash but kept his voice level. "You don't understand, and that might be your weakness." The hunting master seemed amused and left the command center with a final warning that Kreshva would attack again soon after. He departed. Lisa approached Kyle with worry written across her face. "The reinforcement ship is still 3 days out. Can you really survive that long?" "Duke and I have faced worse," Kyle said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. He spent the rest of the morning studying everything the military database had on Xanthari biology and tactics. Most of the information wasn't encouraging, but Kyle did notice something interesting. Every recorded Xanthari hunt involved a single hunter stalking a single target. They never worked in groups, and their tactics relied on individual superiority. Humans were different and had always been different. Humanity survived and thrived through cooperation and partnership. From the moment ancient wolves became dogs, humans understood that working together made both species stronger. Kyle called Duke over, and the Malinois came immediately. He scratched behind the dog's ears, and Duke leaned into the contact with obvious pleasure. "We're a team, boy," Kyle said quietly. "That's something he can't beat." Amy Walker appeared in the doorway with her mother hovering protectively behind her. The girl held a small bag of Duke's favorite training treats. "Mom said I could bring these for Duke since he's protecting us," Amy explained. Kyle smiled and nodded permission. Amy approached carefully and offered Duke a treat, which the dog accepted gently. She wrapped her arms around his neck in a hug. "Duke saved my toy last week when it fell in the water drain," Amy told Kyle. "He's the best dog ever." "Yes, he is." Kyle agreed. Amy's mother led her daughter back to the shelter, but the girl kept looking back at Duke with complete trust that the dog would keep her safe. Kyle felt the weight of that trust settle on his shoulders. That night came quickly, and Kyle took position in the outer patrol area with Duke ranging ahead using his superior senses. The colony lights created a perimeter of safety, but beyond that lay darkness and danger. Duke, alerted at 2300 hours with his ears forward and body tense. Kyle immediately activated his night vision and scanned the area where the dog was. Focus nothing visible, but Kyle trusted his partner absolutely. Good boy, he whispered and raised his rifle. The attack came from a different direction entirely, and Kyle barely registered the movement before a massive shape crashed into his position. He rolled away on instinct while Duke launched at the attacker with vicious speed. HFY had learned from their first encounter and adapted his tactics. The alien was using Duke's alerts against them by creating false trails and attacking from unexpected angles. The fight moved through the colony's outer buildings, with Kyle using cover while Duke harassed the hunter. The Centauri's camouflage made him nearly invisible, but Duke could track by scent and sound what eyes couldn't see. HFY grabbed for Duke, but the dog was too quick and agile. Trained for combat against human opponents, the Malinois adapted instantly to this alien threat. When the Centauri focused on Duke, Kyle would fire, forcing the hunter to evade. They fought this way for nearly 20 minutes, and Kyle realized something important. HFY was getting frustrated. The alien expected quick victory through superior strength and speed, but Kyle and Duke's coordination kept negating those advantages. The hunter tried to separate them by causing a storage container to collapse between Kyle and Duke. For a moment, Kyle lost sight of his partner and heard Duke snarling somewhere in the darkness beyond the debris. Kyle's heart rate spiked with fear for his friend, and he scrambled to get around the obstacle. HFY had planned this, and when Kyle came around the corner, the alien was waiting. Massive clawed hands reached for him, but Duke appeared from another angle and bit down hard on the Centauri's leg. The hunter roared in pain and threw Duke against a wall. Kyle heard the impact, and fury overwhelmed his tactical thinking. He charged the alien, and they grappled hand to hand. HFY was stronger, but Kyle fought with desperate determination. They crashed through equipment and containers, while Duke recovered and rejoined the fight. Together, they drove the alien back, and Kyle managed to slash HFY's arm with his combat knife. Green blood flowed, and the Centauri retreated into the darkness beyond the colony perimeter. Kyle rushed to Duke and checked the dog thoroughly for injuries. Duke had a bruised shoulder, but otherwise seemed okay, and licked Kyle's face in reassurance. "Good boy," Kyle said with shaking hands. "Such a good boy." Back at the command center, medical staff treated Kyle's minor cuts while Duke received attention from the colony's veterinarian. Both were cleared for duty despite Lisa's protests that Kyle should rest. "That hunter is learning our tactics," Kyle told her. "Each time he attacks, he adapts and tries something new. Eventually, he'll find a weakness. Then we evacuate you from the colony," Lisa suggested. "Take you somewhere the hunter can't reach." Kyle shook his head. "He'll just wait, and more people could get hurt. No, this ends here one way or another." In orbit aboard the Centauri ship, Vexter watched footage from HFY's encounter and found himself troubled. The human and his beast fought with a coordination he had never seen between species. When one was threatened, the other responded with immediate ferocity. The hunting master replayed the moment when the dog was thrown against the wall and the humans. Reaction: pure protective fury that overrode tactical sense. This was not how trained beasts behaved, and it was certainly not how simple tools functioned. Vexter began to suspect that humans possessed something Centauri had never encountered. Something that couldn't be measured in strength or speed or sensory capability. He dispatched a message to HFY warning him not to underestimate the prey. HFY received the message in his forest camp while tending his wounds. The young hunter felt shame at his repeated failures and anger at being wounded again by what should have been easy prey. He studied video of the fight and focused on the dog. The creature was clearly the key to the human's effectiveness. If Kreshva could eliminate the beast, then the human would fall easily tomorrow. He would hunt differently, and this time he would finish what he started back. At the civilian shelter, Kyle sat with his back against the wall, and Duke curled up beside him. Amy had convinced her parents to let her stay nearby, and she slept in a corner wrapped in blankets. Kyle watched the girl sleep peacefully because she trusted him and Duke to keep her safe. He thought about how humans had domesticated wolves thousands of years ago and built a partnership that changed both species forever. Dogs gave humans loyalty and companionship and protection. Humans gave dogs purpose and care and love. This bond was unique in the known galaxy, and Kyle suspected the Zentari truly couldn't understand it. Duke shifted in his sleep and pressed closer to Kyle's leg. "We'll keep them safe, boy," Kyle whispered. "All of them." Day 3 of the siege began with Kyle checking the colony's defensive perimeter, while Duke investigated every corner for scent trails. The civilians remained in the central shelters, and supplies were starting to run low. Someone needed to venture out to the supply caches scattered around the settlement. Kyle volunteered because he was already the target, and putting anyone else at risk made no sense. Lisa argued against it, but finally agreed when Kyle pointed out that Duke could detect the hunter better than any sensor they had. They left at mid-morning, with Kyle carrying a portable scanner and Duke ranging ahead in search pattern. The first 2 supply caches were reached without incident, and Kyle loaded emergency rations and medical supplies onto a small hover cart. Duke alerted constantly, but no attack came, and Kyle grew increasingly suspicious. Kreshva was out there watching and waiting for something, but what? The answer came through Kyle's comm unit and Lisa's urgent voice. The civilian shelter was under attack, and the Zentari hunter had somehow bypassed the outer defenses. Kyle's blood turned to ice as he realized the alien had used him as bait. By drawing Kyle away from the shelter, Kreshva had created an opening to strike at the undefended civilians. "I'm coming," Kyle shouted into the comm and abandoned the supply cart to run back toward the shelter at full speed. Duke raced ahead with his powerful legs carrying him faster than Kyle could manage. And the dog disappeared around the corner, heading for the shelter. Kyle pushed himself harder than he ever had and felt his lungs burning with effort. The shelter was only 500 meters from his position, but it felt like kilometers. He burst through the shelter's outer door and found chaos. Inside, colonists were fleeing down hallways, while emergency alarms blared, and somewhere deeper in the structure, Duke was barking furiously. Kyle followed the sound and found Kreshva stalking through a corridor toward the inner chambers where the children were sheltering. The alien moved slowly and deliberately, like a predator savoring his inevitable victory. Duke stood between the hunter and the next doorway, with his teeth bared and every muscle tensed for combat. The dog looked small compared to the massive Zentari, but showed absolutely no fear. "Duke, fall back," Kyle shouted, but the dog ignored him because Duke's mission was to protect, and the children were right behind that door. Kreshva turned his head toward Kyle and spoke in rough standard language. "Finally, you arrive. I wondered if you valued these weak ones enough to abandon tactical advantage. Let me guess," Kyle said while moving to a better position. "You think threatening innocents will make me easier to kill? It reveals your weakness," Kreshva replied. "Zentari would never risk themselves for lesser members of the species. The strong survive and the weak perish as nature intends." Kyle felt anger burning hot in his chest. "That's the difference between us. Humans protect those who can't protect themselves, even when it costs us everything. Then you will die for your foolishness," Kreshva said, and charged. Duke met the attack with fearless courage and latched onto the alien's leg while Kyle opened fire. The corridor was narrow, which limited Kreshva's mobility advantage, and the fight became brutal close combat. The Zentari's strength was incredible, and he threw Duke aside hard enough to dent the metal wall. Kyle rushed forward to engage before the alien could reach the children's door. They collided and Kyle felt ribs crack from the impact, but he didn't back down. Kreshva seemed surprised by the human's willingness to take damage rather than retreat. They grappled in the confined space, and Kyle used every dirty trick he had learned in military training. Duke recovered from being thrown and rejoined the fight by attacking from behind. The alien was taking punishment from two directions and couldn't defend against both simultaneously. Kyle managed to drive his knife into Kreshva's side and green blood sprayed across the corridor walls. The hunter roared in pain and fury, then backhanded Kyle hard enough to send him sprawling for a moment. Kyle's vision went dark, and when it cleared, he saw Kreshva looming over him with clawed hands raised for a killing blow. Duke launched himself at the alien's throat in a desperate attack, and Kreshva had to shift focus to deal with the dog. Those few seconds gave Kyle time to grab his dropped rifle, and he fired 3 rounds into the hunter's chest at point-blank range. Kreshva staggered backward and crashed against the wall. Green blood pooled on the floor beneath him, and his breathing came in ragged gasps. The alien was dying, and both of them knew it. Duke stood ready to attack again, but Kyle called him back. The dog obeyed, though his eyes never left the wounded Xanthara. Kyle got to his feet with pain shooting through his ribs and approached the fallen hunter carefully. Security teams arrived with weapons raised, but Kyle waved them back. He stood over Kreshva and raised his rifle to finish it. The alien looked up at him with those predator eyes and said something that sounded like acceptance. In Xanthari culture, losing a hunt meant death and dishonor, but Kreshva seemed almost relieved. It was finally over. Kyle's finger rested on the trigger, and all he had to do was squeeze. Then he heard a small voice from behind him and turned to see Amy peeking out from the children's chamber doorway. The little girl looked scared and confused. "Are you going to kill him?" Amy asked quietly. Kyle looked from the child to the dying alien and back again. His military training said eliminate the threat, but something deeper made him hesitate. "He tried to hurt you and the other children," Kyle said, "but he's already hurt." Amy replied with that simple logic children sometimes have. "Killing him won't make us safer." Duke whined softly and looked up at Kyle with complete trust in whatever decision his partner would make. Kyle thought about what he had told Kreshva just minutes earlier, that humans protect the weak even when it costs them. He thought about the partnership with Duke that was built on loyalty and trust, not domination. He thought about the kind of example he wanted to set for Amy and the other children. Slowly, Kyle lowered his rifle and activated his medical team to Chorus 7. "We have a wounded alien who needs immediate treatment." Kreshva's eyes widened in shock. "Why would you save your enemy?" "Because the hunt is over and you lost," Kyle said firmly. "Killing you now wouldn't be justice, it would just be revenge. And humans learned a long time ago that revenge doesn't solve anything." The medical team arrived with stretchers and equipment and began working to stabilize the Xanthari. Kreshva remained conscious and kept staring at Kyle with something like confusion. "You were defeated by a worthy opponent," Kyle told him. "There's no dishonor in that. The dishonor would be in me executing a helpless enemy." Duke sat beside Kyle and pressed against his leg in support. Amy emerged fully from the doorway and walked over to stand next to them. "Is he going to be okay?" the girl asked. "I don't know," Kyle admitted. "But we're going to try to save him." Security teams escorted the civilians to a different shelter area while medical staff worked on Kreshva. Kyle stayed nearby with Duke and Amy until her parents came to collect her. "Thank you for protecting us," Amy said, and hugged Duke one more time before leaving. Kyle sank down against the wall and felt exhaustion crash over him. His ribs were definitely broken, and he had cuts and bruises covering his body, but they had survived. Duke curled up next to him, and Kyle scratched behind the dog's ears. "You were so brave, boy. So incredibly brave." Administrator Lisa appeared, and she looked shaken by everything that had happened. The medical team says the alien will live, but he'll need extensive treatment. What made you decide to save him? Kyle thought about his answer carefully. Because that's what humans do. We could have domesticated wolves by dominating them through strength. But instead, we built a partnership based on mutual benefit and trust. That same principle guided us into space, and it's what makes us different from species like the Zentari. Vexter is requesting to speak with you, Lisa said. He watched everything through Kreshva's body camera. Kyle struggled to his feet with Duke staying close for support. Then let's talk to him. They made their way to the command center where Hunting Master Vexter appeared on the main view screen. The massive alien studied Kyle with an expression that was hard to read. You spared Kreshva, Vexter said, and it wasn't quite a question. I did, Kyle confirmed. Why? The Hunting Master demanded. He tried to kill you and threatened your young. By all rights of combat, you earned the kill. Kyle met those predator eyes without flinching. Because I wanted to show him and you that human strength doesn't come from killing everything we defeat. It comes from knowing when to show mercy. Vexter was silent for a long moment. I have hunted across 1,000 worlds and faced creatures of nightmare from every corner of the galaxy. But I have never encountered anything like what I witnessed today. What's that? Kyle asked. A bond between species that transcends simple training or obedience, Vexter said slowly. The way you and your companion fought together. The way you risked everything to protect the weak. The way you showed mercy to an enemy who would have killed you without hesitation. These things are alien to Zentari culture. Duke growled softly, but Kyle placed a hand on the dog's head for calm. Maybe it's time the Zentari learned something new. Kyle suggested. The Hunting Master's expression shifted, and for the first time since this all started, Kyle saw something other than predatory confidence in those alien features. The medical bay had been converted to handle Zentari physiology, and Kreshva lay on a reinforced bed while human doctors worked to save his life. Kyle watched through the observation window with Duke at his side and felt conflicted about the whole situation. This alien had tried to kill him multiple times and threatened children, yet here Kyle had ordered medical teams to save his life. Part of him wondered if he had made the right choice, but another part knew with certainty that showing mercy was exactly what separated humans from mindless predators. Administrator Lisa joined him at the window and spoke quietly. The doctors say he'll survive, but recovery will take weeks. Vexter has agreed to transfer him to their medical facilities once he's stable enough for transport. What happens then? Kyle asked. That depends on Zentari culture, Lisa replied. According to their customs, Kreshva failed his honor hunt and should be exiled. But Vexter seems uncertain how to proceed given that you spared his life. Through the window, Kyle could see Kreshva was conscious and staring at the ceiling with an unreadable expression. The young hunter had probably expected to die in glorious combat, not be saved by the prey he had been hunting. Master Vexter had remained in orbit, but sent word that he wanted to visit the colony in person to speak with both Kreshva and Kyle. Lisa granted permission, and the massive alien arrived the following morning. Kyle met him at the landing pad with Duke alert beside him and several security personnel standing at a respectful distance. Vexter approached with slow, deliberate steps and studied the human and dog carefully. I wish to understand what I witnessed, Vexter said without preamble. Zentari culture has existed for thousands of years, and in that time we have hunted across the galaxy without failure. Yet a human soldier and his companion defeated one of our hunters through means I cannot fully comprehend. Kyle crossed his arms and considered how to explain. You said Duke was just a trained beast like a tool or weapon, but you're wrong about that, and your misunderstanding is why Kreshva failed. Explain, Vexter commanded. Kyle knelt down beside Duke, and the dog leaned into him with obvious affection. Humans domesticated dogs from wolves over 15,000 years ago. but we didn't do it through force or domination. We built a partnership where both species benefited, and over generations that partnership became something deeper. Duke licked Kyle's hand and the soldier smiled. Duke isn't a tool I use. He's my friend and partner who chooses to work with me. When I'm in danger, he fights to protect me, not because I train him to, but because he cares about me. And I do the same for him. Vexter tilted his head in what might have been confusion. Zentari do not form attachments to other species. We are apex predators who stand alone. And that's your weakness, Kyle said, standing up. Humans succeed through cooperation and partnership. We're not the strongest or fastest species in the galaxy, but we build bonds with others that make us stronger together than we could ever be alone. The hunting master seemed to consider this. You risked your life to protect young who were not your offspring. You spared an enemy who would have killed you. These actions make no logical sense from a survival perspective. Kyle shook his head. They make perfect sense if you understand that humans measure strength differently than Zentari. We protect the weak because we value all life, not just the strong. We show mercy because we know that making enemies into allies is better than just killing everything we defeat. This is why you partnered with the wolves, Vexter said slowly as understanding began to dawn. Exactly, Kyle confirmed. Ancient humans could have tried to wipe out wolves as competitors, but instead we recognized their potential as partners. That decision changed both our species forever and taught us lessons we carried into space. Vexter requested to see Kreshva, and Kyle escorted him to the medical bay with Duke staying close. The young Zentari hunter looked smaller and less threatening lying in the hospital bed with medical equipment monitoring his vital signs. Kreshva's eyes widened when he saw his hunting master enter. Vexter, I have failed and brought dishonor to our people. You have certainly failed to hunt, Vexter agreed. But I'm beginning to question whether that brings dishonor or simply reveals our own limitations. Kyle stayed near the door while the two Zentari spoke in their own language for several minutes. Duke sat patiently and watched the aliens with cautious attention. Finally, Vexter switched back to standard so Kyle could understand. Kreshva, I am giving you a choice. You may accept exile and return to our homeworld in disgrace, or you may remain here and learn from these humans who defeated you. Kreshva looked shocked. Remain with prey? They are not prey, Vexter said firmly. They are something we have never encountered before, a species that builds strength through bonds, rather than individual superiority. I would know more about this, and you are uniquely positioned to learn. The young hunter's gaze shifted to Kyle and Duke. You spared my life when you had the right to kill me. Why? Kyle moved closer to the bed. Because I wanted you to understand that humans don't measure worth by who wins in combat. Every life has value, and killing you would have accomplished nothing except creating more hatred between our species. But I threatened your young ones, Kreshva said with what sounded like guilt. Yes, you did, Kyle agreed. And if you had actually hurt them, I probably would have killed you. But you didn't get that far because Duke and I stopped you. Now you have a chance to learn why humans fight to protect rather than just to dominate. Amy Walker appeared in the doorway with her mother trying to hold her back. The little girl had somehow convinced the adults to let her come to the medical bay. Is that the alien who tried to hurt us? Amy asked, pointing at Kreshva. Started to say yes, but Amy walked right up to the bed before anyone could stop her. She studied the wounded Zentari with curious eyes. You look sad, Amy observed. Reshev seemed completely bewildered by this small human who showed no fear. I am defeated, and my honor is lost. Kyle says honor is about doing the right thing, not about winning fights, Amy replied. Maybe you can learn new things and get better honor. The simplicity of a child's logic seemed to strike something in the alien hunter. He looked from Amy to Kyle to Duke, and back again. How can prey teach predators? Kreshva asked quietly. Amy smiled and pulled something from her pocket. It was one of Duke's favorite treats. You start by making friends. Here, you can give this to Duke, and then he'll like you. She held out the treat, and after a moment's hesitation, Kreshva took it with his large clawed hand. Amy called Duke over, and the Malinois approached cautiously. The dog sniffed the alien carefully, and then focused on the treat. Hold it out flat so he can take it gently. Amy instructed Reshev, did as told, and Duke carefully took the treat from the alien's palm. The simple act of feeding the dog seemed to fascinate the Zentari hunter. See? Amy said proudly. Now you're friends. Kyle caught Amy's mother's eye, and the woman looked like she might faint from stress, but hadn't stopped her daughter. Sometimes, children understood important things better than adults. Vexter watched this interaction with intense focus. A warrior of my people taking instruction from a human child while offering food to the beast that helped to feed him. This is unprecedented. Welcome to how humans build partnerships. Kyle said over the next few days, Kreshva remained in the medical bay, recovering from his wounds, while colony life slowly returned to normal. The Zentari hunter asked questions constantly about human culture and the relationship between humans and dogs. Duke visited the medical bay regularly because Amy insisted on it, and gradually Kreshva began to understand what he had been fighting against. The bond between Kyle and Duke wasn't training or obedience, but genuine friendship built over years of shared experiences. On my world, strong predators hunt alone. Kreshva explained one afternoon. Working with others is seen as weakness because it means you cannot succeed by yourself. Kyle sat beside the bed with Duke's head resting on his knee. Humans used to think strength meant doing everything alone too. But we learned that working together makes everyone stronger. Duke can smell and hear things I can't, while I can plan and use tools he can't. Together we're better than either of us could be separately. And this is why you protect the young and weak. Kreshva said with growing understanding. Because you recognize that every individual adds something to the group. Exactly. Kyle confirmed Vex's scent. Word that he was extending his stay in orbit to observe the colony and learn more about human culture. Other Zentari hunters began requesting permission to visit and study these strange beings who had defeated one of their own through partnership. Rather than superior strength, Lisa saw an opportunity and proposed a formal cultural exchange program between humans and Zentari. Vexter agreed, and suddenly New Haven colony became a meeting place for two very different species to learn from each other. Kyle found himself teaching Zentari hunters about teamwork and cooperation, while learning about their incredible sensory abilities and hunting techniques. Duke became something of a celebrity among the aliens who couldn't believe a creature would risk its life for a being of another species. Amy continued to visit Kreshva daily, and the massive alien warrior showed surprising patience with the small human child. She taught him. 6 weeks after the hunt ended, Kyle sat in his quarters, writing a report to military command, while Duke slept peacefully at his feet. The document detailed everything that had happened and, more importantly, what it meant for human-Zentari relations. Going forward, the report explained that humanity's strength in the galaxy didn't come from superior weapons or technology, but from their unique ability to form partnerships across species boundaries. The bond between humans and dogs that began 15,000 years ago had taught valuable lessons about cooperation and trust that now extended to building alliances with alien civilizations. Kyle wrote that the Zentari represented a species that had achieved apex predator status through individual excellence and natural superiority, but had never learned the value of genuine partnership. By showing mercy to Kreshva and demonstrating the strength of the human-dog bond, Kyle had opened a door to cultural exchange that could benefit both species. He recommended that military command establish formal training programs to help Zentari hunters understand teamwork and cooperation, while humans could learn from Zentari's sensory abilities and combat techniques. This mutual exchange would strengthen both peoples and create lasting friendship instead of potential future conflict. As Kyle finished the report, Duke stirred and lifted his head. The Malinois's ears perked up and his tail began wagging before Kyle heard the knock at the door. "Come in," Kyle called, and Amy entered carrying a drawing. "I made this for you and Duke," the little girl announced, and held up a picture showing a stick figure human and a dog standing next to a much larger alien figure. All three were smiling and holding hands in the way children draw friendship. "That's beautiful, Amy," Kyle said sincerely. "Is that you and me and Duke and Kreshva?" Amy nodded enthusiastically. Kreshva said he never had friends before coming here, but now he has lots of them. He told me that you taught him friendship is stronger than winning. Kyle felt a surge of pride at those words. "He's learning well. Will he have to leave soon?" Amy asked with concern. "Probably eventually," Kyle admitted. "But I think he'll come back to visit and maybe bring other Zentari who want to learn what he learned." Amy seemed satisfied with that answer and ran off to show her drawing to Kreshva, who was now mobile enough to walk around the colony with supervision. Kyle stood and stretched while Duke got up and pressed against his leg. They had patrol duty in an hour, but first Kyle wanted to check on the cultural exchange program that had been formalized. Last week, the colony's community center had been converted into a meeting space where humans and Zentari could interact. Kyle found Kreshva there sitting on a reinforced chair while a group of colonists asked him questions about his homeworld. The young Zentari had changed dramatically from the proud hunter who first attacked Kyle. He now spoke with humility about his failures and what he had learned from defeat. More importantly, he talked about the value of bonds and partnerships with genuine enthusiastic. Star stood at the back of the room observing everything. And when he noticed Kyle, he gestured for the human to join him. "Kreshva is teaching our people things I never thought possible," the hunting master said quietly. "He describes the bond you share with your companion and other Zentari. Listen with fascination. Are they ready to accept these ideas?" Kyle asked. "Some are resistant and claim we should maintain our traditional ways," Vexter admitted. "But many of our younger hunters see the wisdom in learning cooperation. They recognize that the galaxy is changing and Zentari must adapt or be left behind." Kyle watched as Kreshva demonstrated a human handshake to a curious Zentari visitor. "What changed your mind about all this?" Vexter was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I watched you spare Kreshva when you had every right to kill him. I watched you protect young who were not your bloodline. I watched the way your companion risked everything to defend you. These actions revealed something my species has missed for millennia." "What's that?" Kyle prompted. "That true strength is not about dominating others, but about choosing when to show mercy and when to extend friendship," Vexter said. "Zentari have conquered 1,000 worlds, but we have never built the kinds of bonds I see humans create effortlessly. You turned wolves into dogs and enemies into allies, while my people remain isolated despite our power." Duke wandered over to investigate a group of young Zentari who were nervously trying to interact with the military dog. Kyle watched as the Malinois patiently allowed them to pet him and study his behavior. "Duke is teaching them too," Kyle observed, "just by being himself and showing trust. The lesson of the companion animal." Vexter mused, "That partnership can exist between vastly different species if both choose to respect and value each other." Over the following weeks, more Zentari arrived to study at New Haven Colony, and the cultural exchange program expanded. Human military advisors taught cooperation and team tactics, while Zentari shared their advanced tracking and sensory techniques. Kyle found himself leading mixed training exercises where humans and Zentari worked together on simulated missions. The aliens struggled initially with the concept of supporting teammates rather than relying on individual ability, but gradually they began to understand. Kreshva proved to be the best student and became a liaison between the species. He had experienced both the pride of the traditional Zentari way and the strength that came from human-style partnership, and could explain the differences to his people one afternoon. Kyle was conducting a tracking exercise with a mixed team when Kreshva approached. With excitement, "Sergeant Martinez, I have been offered a position as cultural ambassador to the Zentari High Council. Vexter has recommended me to teach our leaders what I learned here." "That's wonderful," Kyle said, genuinely pleased. "You've come a long way from the hunter who tried to kill me." Kreshva's expression showed something like shame. "I deeply regret my actions during the hunt. I threatened innocence and fought without honor because I did not understand what honor truly means. You understand now, and that's what matters." Kyle assured him, "You're going to help change an entire culture for the better, because you showed me mercy when I deserved none." Kreshva said, "That single choice has altered the path of my entire life, and perhaps my entire species." Duke trotted over and sat beside Kyle. Kreshva knelt down and offered the dog a treat, which Duke accepted gently. The alien who once saw dogs as simple beasts now understood they were intelligent partners worthy of respect. Amy came running across the training field and launched herself at Kreshva in a hug. The massive Zentari carefully returned the embrace with the gentleness he had learned over weeks of interaction. "You can't leave yet," Amy protested. "I have more things to teach you." "I will return to visit," Kreshva promised. "And perhaps you can visit my homeworld someday and teach other young Zentari about friendship." The little girl's eyes went wide with excitement at that possibility. That evening, the colony held a farewell celebration for Kreshva and the other Zentari who would be returning home. The gathering mixed both species in ways that would have seemed impossible. Just weeks earlier, Vexather gave a speech about the lessons learned and the new path forward for Zentari culture. He spoke about how meeting humans and understanding that human-dog partnership had revealed weaknesses in their traditional ways. "We believed apex predator status meant we needed no one," Vexter declared, but Sergeant Martinez and his companion, Duke, showed us that true strength comes from choosing who to protect rather than who to hunt. This is wisdom we will carry back to our people. Kyle was asked to speak, and he stood, with Duke beside him facing the assembled crowd of humans and Zentari. 6 weeks ago, Kreshva came to this colony as a hunter seeking prey. Kyle began. Today he leaves as a friend and ambassador who will help bridge two cultures. This transformation happened because both sides were willing to look past our differences and find common ground. He reached down to pat Duke's head. Humans partnered with wolves thousands of years ago, and that partnership taught us that cooperation makes everyone stronger. We're not the biggest or fastest or strongest species in the galaxy, but we know how to build bonds that transcend those individual advantages. The crowd listened in respectful silence. The Zentari have incredible abilities and a proud warrior culture. Kyle continued, but they were missing something important, and now through cultural exchange, we can share what we know while learning from their strengths. This is how humanity approaches the galaxy, and it's made us successful. Amy stood up in the front row and shouted, "Because friends are better than enemies." Everyone laughed, and Kyle nodded. "Exactly right, Amy. Friends are always better than enemies." The celebration continued late into the night with humans and Zentari sharing food and stories. Kyle watched it all with satisfaction, knowing that his choice to show mercy had created something far bigger than he had imagined. The next morning, Kreshva prepared to depart with Vexter and the other visiting Zentari. He spent his last hour at the colony with Kyle and Duke and Amy. "I will never forget what you taught me," Kreshva said solemnly, "and I will spend my life teaching others Zentari these lessons. Just remember that strength isn't about being the apex predator." Kyle reminded him, "It's about knowing when to protect and when to show mercy and when to extend friendship."